I'm Rochelle, and I'm very, very excited to be guiding you guys today through our workflow and approvals release webinar. So super exciting new feature coming in. I can't wait to kind of jump in and teach you all more about it. Some of you may have already jumped in and started exploring it or having a bit of a think about how you could use it. But today we're really going to explore everything. I'll give you a few use cases as well as to how we can use it already. But I'm sure you'll all have some really creative ways of getting amongst it and trialing it out on your own side of things as well. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is just jump in and start kind of explaining our new feature, which is super exciting. First off, I just want to kind of guide you guys through our setup of the workflow and approvals. So the first idea of it overall is that we're going to start to have kind of knock-on forms from an initial kind of trigger form. So pretty much we'll have a starting form that the team will jump in, they'll complete that, and then the completion of that or the approval of that form will then flow on to have other ones come up to be completed. It doesn't have to just be by the submitter that those other forms are completed. It could be assigned to specific people or user groups, and you'll see that when we start to jump into the settings of it. But when you get into your form builder, on that admin console, you're going to be able to choose from advanced settings now. And this is going to allow us to set approvals. So say that first form needs to first be approved and then the flow on forms come in. We can set that up, assign a user group to it and assign specific individuals if we need to as well. Additionally, you've got a prefix or a kind of expiry as well. First piece is that expiry one where we've got kind of a never option, a days option, or an hours option. This depends on how long you want this workflow to last or how maximum amount of time you need it to be going on for. So for example, in the case of a permit, we might have a 7-day period where we need to have the hot works happening. And if it goes longer than that, then the whole workflow needs to stop and we can't continue work. So in this case, we would then go and put in the amount of days we need this to last. And the team do have an opportunity to lower those number of days if they think they're going to get the work done in a quicker amount of time. Another case might be an incident. You want to have an incident investigation workflow maybe, and that investigation needs to happen within at least kind of 2 days it gets resolved. So we might put that kind of timeline on it. So that's your expiry prefix there. Then we've got the numbering prefix. So this is really handy if you want to start getting a count of how many maybe incidents are starting to happen, any permits that might be happening, or any other kind of numbering system you guys might have within your forms. So definitely start to utilize this if you've already got that system or if you want to start implementing a process like that as well. Generally what happens is we kind of put a wording code. So for hot works here, I'd put HOTW as an example, and then that would just go HOTW 1, 2, 3 every time we have a new kind of hot works come up. Really handy for your tracking of where we're at. Awesome. Then we're going to go into our workflow section. So this is where we start loading in the knock-on forms that we want to have flow from that first initial trigger form. So all we need to be doing is when you select this and turn it on, we'll have that option open up to select a form that you want to have flow through. And then once we're done with all of the ones we want knocking on, we can then have a trigger to close out that workflow as well. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into the system and actually see this setting up in action. I'm in my form builder section here, and I'm going to use my incidents workflow as our example. So as you can see, I've got my incident and injury report form, which will just be the one that everyone kind of completes whenever an injury or an incident starts to happen, or we have had it happen, we need a report on it. Then what I have also built in to the system, just as our form list, we'll have our incident investigation form there as well. Now, you might have certain other forms locked into your kind of investigation as well. I've kept it really simple for the purpose of today, but you might see things like lost time injury also involved in this workflow and other kind of incident related forms, or you might break up your incident into different forms that we want to have knock on from this first report. But what we want to do is build in this workflow from that initial form that's going to be the trigger. So I'm taking the incident report and I'm going to open that up with the edit button into that form design. Now in here, we've got that beautiful advanced settings section. I'll open that up and see my approvals, expiry or prefix, and workflows. Now, first off, I want it to have an approval. So I'm going to pop that open and turn it on. Now this is going to allow me to set some settings around that. I've currently got one user who is my manager that's going to be that approver, but I can set a user group of people if I need to. If we change it to this, it does show you your different user groups that you have set up, and then also the different members and how many members are in those user groups. So you know, okay, there's going to be a few people in that user group. I can actually assign it and people will get this notification. If there's no members in it, we probably don't want to put that user group on, or we want to put some people in that user group so we can have them get this notification. So I'm just going to keep it to just a user for now, and then make it just that manager user. Perfect. You can select more than one if you need to as well, of course. You can assign it to maybe 2 specific users if you need to. Then I've got the number of approvals required as well. So in this case, I only need 1 approval, but I might have 2 or 3 people who get the approval notification. And that's also the case whether you have the user group set up, you might have 3 people in that user group, they'll all get the notification to approve it. And whoever the first person to approve it is, will be that 1. And we only need 1, so that then triggers the whole workflow to start. So in this case, I only need 1. And I've only got 1 approver as well. So that's all good. We're ready to go with our approval side of this workflow. Then I'm going to set my expiry date. If it's to never, that just means it can be open until it's been closed manually. If I put some days on it, I might say, okay, I want my investigation to only last 2 days maximum. After that, it needs to be closed and automatically and then reopened if we haven't done it in the time we need to. Additionally, some of you for kind of permit to works, you might have a specific amount of hours. It might be a shift, a 1-day shift that you need to have that permit last for. So you might just kind of have it set to an hour setting. Today, I'm going to keep it to 2 days because that's my setting I want. And what I might do for my numbering prefix is just put a code like INC as my incident code. And this will start the count from kind of 1 onwards. I've already got a few that have that code, so you'll see my numbers are a little bit higher. But yeah, you can start to set that flow up of your incident prefixes. Awesome. Now moving through, we've got the workflows. So in this case, I want to have that incident investigation form as my knock-on one. So I'm going to turn this workflow section on. And I'm going to go through and select the form. So in here, it gives me that list of all the forms. I'd probably type in incident and find my investigation form. Now, this investigation form might not be done by the person who did the first initial report, but you can also have these knock-on forms done by the submitter. So in this case, we have submitter chosen, but I personally don't want the investigation to be done by the submitter from the very beginning form. So I'm actually going to change this and make it a specific individual, which again is going to also be my approver. So that manager that I set earlier is also going to be the approver. Sorry, the kind of person to investigate this. Now, I know that this is the last form in my workflow because it's a really simple workflow. So what I want to do is make it a closeout trigger. If you have a few other forms to add, just save it without the closeout trigger kind of turned on, and it'll add it to the list. Then you can keep building, and the last one needs to have that closeout trigger turned on. In this case, we only want it to be just this form closing it off. So I'm going to do my investigation form, pop it to that manager again, and make it a closeout. Now we can see it's got that closeout trigger kind of symbol attached to it. So we know that's the end form to close this workflow. Awesome. So now I'm ready. I've got my approval set up. My expiry and my kind of numbering system is assigned, and then my workflow is ready to go as well with those forms knocking on from the others. Now, another thing to keep in mind with the setup of this workflow is currently our forms might be set up in a way where we're asking those kind of investigation questions within the current form, the first one. So you might want to ask or change different questions. In this case, I've actually got a design where I'm asking about lost time and injury, or I've also asked here, does this require investigation, and have a few investigation questions in the first form. So in this case, I would probably change the design of this first form now, because I know that there's now knock-on forms that we will have cover the right questions. So have a bit of a think about the designs of your forms now that we might have flow-on forms instead. So we can break it up a little bit more, and the first submitter doesn't have to necessarily answer everything. Of course, in an incident relation kind of piece, we would want to have them submit all the detail we can to assist with that investigation. A really good tool to use in this is kind of our correct, what am I trying to say? Conditional sections. So in this case here, I've got that is a result of a lost time injury as a conditional section, so that if it doesn't apply, we can just say no and move past it. Or if it does apply, that answers that. And then my investigator will know, okay, it was resulted into lost time injury. Here's the detail about that. Let's go and investigate that further. So definitely adjust those designs as you need it to kind of suit that workflow you've created. So my trigger form's ready to go. All of the workflow and approvals are set up. I'm going to save that. Now, looking into the form list here, you'll start to see these symbols showing up against that form to kind of let you know it has a workflow assigned to it, which is this symbol here, or it has an approval assigned to it as well. And remember, guys, you don't have to always put an approval and a workflow. You could just have an approval on one form so that you know, okay, maybe there's an induction form and that needs to just have an approval after it. So every time someone comes in to do that induction, we have that coming through to someone as an approval. Maybe a user group gets that as an approval, or you as an individual, as an admin, maybe get that as an approval. So one or the other is applicable as well. You don't have to do all of the settings if you don't want to. So take it as you need. So that's the general setup. I might even have an approval in the investigation form as well, or you could even have another follow-up like workflow from the investigation form if you need to as well, but we'll keep it simple for today. Additional settings we might want to create before we kind of jump into how this all looks in the mobile. We're going to go into My Business. In here, we've obviously got our settings. And the workflow and approval piece that we can set up in here is our workflow numbering. Now, this is mainly for your reporting side of things. So keep in mind that our numbering will need to come through to our reports and be structured based on how you guys have your numbering system structured in your business. So we just have a few options here. The most common one to use is site, job, project level, and form category level. So it kind of just means the numbering system is assigned based on like site, job, or project, and then also from the form category level. So we can see in our reporting, okay, this form category has a numbering system and it's based on this site, job, or project. You also do have it just at site, job, or project level. You also have it at organization level, which means it's just at your organization. So for example, here Buchanan Building is my organization. So it's just a general numbering system within the org. It's not kind of limited specifically to form categories or sites or anything like that. And then lastly, we have just the org level, of course, as well. Sorry, that last one was org level and form category. So we see that different filtering in there, but then the top one is just org level. So it's just kind of a branching of what your filtering will start to look like when you come into your reporting for these workflows and the numbering of them. So this is only really to keep in mind if you guys do have a numbering system you want to incorporate, of course. Awesome. So that's a bit of a deeper layer setting if you need it. Now let's jump back quickly. I'm just going to go into the different kind of use cases we have here. So we might have the incident one that I just showed you. This is going to generally see things like your incident form report starting off as a trigger. Then you have your investigation form that might be part of it. A lot of people might have a lost time injury form, and then even maybe an investigation closeout. So maybe just like a sign-off form at the very end that you just want to have as like a nice wrap-up form to say, yeah, this workflow is actually done. We're good. Up to you how you want to make it. But definitely build out each of these forms to make sure you've got them there to have that workflow built. Up to you how you want to go about which ones you need based on your different processes within the company. Then from there, we've got a permits to work example. So of course, I'll start off generally with like a permit application, and then that would just be the submitter or the field worker that'll start that. They'll do all their checklists, everything they need to do that pre-work application. And then that can flow into any of the forms that you need them to complete throughout the work. So for example, we'll have a fire watch form in this case. And then at the very end of all the fire watching and all of the work being done, we'll have a comprehensive inspection. That might be done by someone different. So the fire watch may be done by the submitter or even another person in the team who's actually qualified for the fire watch. And then we have the comprehensive inspection may be done by a manager. So we can assign those different forms to those different people within the workflow. And of course, the comprehensive inspection would be kind of the closeout form, because once that inspection's done, we know the work's sorted and it's all finished and it's all, the site's safe. So we can close that out. Then I've also got a training example here. So a lot of the time you guys might have a module or maybe a safe operating procedure kind of training or qualification the teams need to get. So what we can do is have them do that training. You can have that request form to start the module maybe within SciDAP Pro. Then you can have some questionnaires knocking on from that, maybe 2 or 3 questionnaires related to that. And then at the very end, you might have a trainer's kind of assessment form that will be obviously assigned to like a manager or an admin that also closes it out. Awesome. Additional thing with that training one, these forms will generally be assigned to that training category. The great thing about that would mean that that then shows up in the training history under that user's user login. So you can start to see all these forms and workflows flow into that as well, which is super nice to kind of have it all in nice one big pocket in one place. Awesome. My last example here for you is, if I didn't skip it through, is the induction section. So this is more for people who want to have, can you guys see me? I think I've bugged out a little bit. There we go. Okay, we're back. Oh, great. Thanks, Soph. So my inductions use case would be mainly starting with the induction form. So a lot of you have inductions for subcontractors or for your general team as well. And you can, of course, set up a different trigger form based on those different kind of requirements, of course. Or we could even just have kind of conditional sections as well within our first form so that the next knock-on ones make sense for them. But you've got your induction form that would start. That completion or approval of that form will then trigger those next forms, like any training forms, perhaps, even maybe an evacuation plan or SSSP kind of acknowledgements. That's that site-specific safety plan that you guys might have. A lot of people might just have any resource that induction needs to show to people so that we can have that just be kind of signed off on almost. So up to you completely based on what processes you go about with your induction, but have a think about those different forms that might flow on from someone completing just like a simple induction form to start. Awesome. Of course, there are so many more use cases you guys could utilize, and I'm sure you'll get super creative with it. So pop your ideas in the chat, and if you want to kind of talk about them, and if you ever have any questions or ideas that you are like, oh, will this work? Let us know through support@scidapro.com. And then also, if you have your designated customer success manager, reach out to them and say, hey, how could I set this up? I want to talk about it and maybe build it with you. Awesome. So those are our workflows. Now let's move along to kind of see how this might work in action. So back to that incident example we had before, we've done the setup of it. The settings are all there, good to go. We know what other use cases we can use, but in this case, I want to see how the submitter will look on their side. So in the mobile, we've come in, we've got that site incident and injury report that I started by the submitter. So this is just like a field worker who's come in and filled this form out. We've saved it as final. And then what you're going to get is a page that kind of gives you a bit of a summary of what that kind of means. So you've now done this form. It's going to be going to this person for approval. This is the date and time you completed it. This is that section here where we have the duration of 2 days. Maybe I know this investigation is going to actually only take 1 day. So what I can do is click onto that 2 days section and it'll just make me choose 1 day or 2 days. And I can put that number down if I need to. Same for hot works permits or any kind of hot work permit. You might say, I'm actually going to get the work done in 2 days instead of 7 days. Pop that date down, and then that way you can kind of get it done in the time you need. Awesome. So I'm going to click continue from there, and it's going to take us through to this page where it lets us know there's an approval that needs to be required for this first. So once that's all done, we click continue, and then that approval will shoot off to the manager that I had set up as the approval that we can see is here. And then we know they're going to go and approve it. And then the rest of the forms that are in relation to this incident will then be kind of assigned to the correct people in their to-do list. So now that it's moved from the submitter, they've completed it, let's look at what happens for the approver or the investigator. So in their case, they've got a kind of a pop-up that'll come up. It'll come as a push notification first, and it'll also show in the messages section of the team's kind of menu bar. Additionally, you will also start seeing it in the to-do list as well. So it'll come up as like a task for today or even in progress if there's still a form that's being completed within it. But generally, those are locations you'll start seeing it. Push notification in the messages section of your mobile or the to-do list as well. So there's 3 kind of locations we can go to see the whole kind of container of these workflows. As you can see to the left here, we've got that container, so we can see the site incident injury report was done, and that's all ticked off and completed by that submitter. And then now I had to have an approval, so I've gone and approved it from that message. And then I have now got those other workflow forms coming through. So that investigation form is not complete yet. It's kind of showing as empty, and I need to go and do that. And you can even see who it's assigned to. So the field worker was doing the incident injury report. And then as the manager, this is assigned to me. So I know who needs to complete this form, whether it's me or someone else in the team. Awesome. With that piece as well, if I click into this form and it's not me who's assigned to it, I won't have access to it. So it won't let me open up that form to complete it. So just keep that in mind with when you're assigning different forms to different people. If you need a few people to be able to access it, we want to give it to user groups or multiple kind of individual users based on your teams and the structure you guys have. Awesome. Then once we've finished that and we've completed all those forms, I've done my investigation, it's now going to come into a closed kind of state. So that container now shows both of the forms are ticked off, and we've got this gray out kind of closed option here as well. Now, there might be a few examples where we have started a workflow and we actually are canceling it, we're changing it. So what we might want to do is in the top right here, you will click into that button and you'll start to see a void or cancel option. And I'll jump into the mobile and show you what that looks like on a workflow I've kind of partially started. But there might be states where you need to kind of cancel a workflow before it actually gets closed because it's actually just not worked, or there was an incident maybe from the hotworks permit, or something's gone wrong, we need to void it. So those are the states we can start to see it in, and those locations we can start to find it for the approver as well. Cool. So quickly before I look into the reporting side of it, I just want to jump into that mobile view and show you guys kind of what a in progress one is going to start to look like. So this is my field worker. They're the one who kind of submitted my first forms. So in the case I'm going to show you right now, it's hotworks permit related. So my field worker over here to the right has completed a hotworks kind of application. And then that came to me for an approval. So if I look into the menu on my manager's login, I'll go into messages and I can start to see those different approvals or kind of requests that have come through. So my incident one came through for that site incident injury report. I had that investigation form that I had to do and I completed that. And now I've got that hotworks permit that's been submitted by my field worker. So I can start to open that up, see those options there, and see the form that they've actually submitted. So I can start to read it and be like, okay, yes, they're actually ready to do the hotworks. So in this case, I would maybe say approve. And that's going to show me it's all approved and we can continue. Now, when we start to jump into this, we can see within that container, it's approved, it's got that hotworks permit approval start, and then we just need to do these extra forms as well. So I can see the submitter, who's that field worker, is going to have to do the fire watch, and then I'm going to have that comprehensive inspection once they're done with that. So as we start to get these forms completed over that 7 days that we've got set, we'll kind of see it be ticked off. Now, in relation to that voiding aspect I was just talking to, we would go into the top right here, and I can either void it or close this workflow. So say maybe the fire watch hasn't gone very well. It's actually come up with an issue and the site's burning down and it's a bit of a chaotic moment. So what we're going to do is come into here once we've sorted out the fire, of course, come and void this or close it off because that whole hotworks piece or workflow didn't actually go through to the end. It didn't get to that comprehensive inspection because everything kind of was a bit messy. So we can definitely kind of see that that reporting is then closed and cancelled. So I might even just come into here and say void this workflow and say the fire watch wasn't complete. We had a fire. And void it. Awesome. So that'll kind of start to update those statuses, and that's how we can start to engage with those approval aspects of it and those messages that are coming through. Awesome. Now, moving back to the admin console, I want to jump into the reporting and how once all these kind of forms and submissions and applications and approvals are kind of done, where are they going? How do we report on them and what do they look like? So starting off, I'm going to jump into our dashboard. In here, you are going to have a new tile that shows you kind of what the status of these different workflows and approvals are. So for example, I've got one that's been closed out. It might actually just do a bit of a refresh so we can see that one that was voided. Bear with me for a second. It's not coming through for me. If I click on the permit one, there you can see that voided one. So because it was a permit that was voided, that's where we're going to kind of have that filtering aspect there. And this is also based on the date ranges you have set, of course, as well. So last 7 days, for example, we had that one that was voided, and then the incident option was closed out. So those are my two that are currently on the go or completed. And so that's how I can start to see quick stats on where my workflows and approvals are kind of at. Now, a really great thing about this tile now is we can actually click onto these like objects, and it takes us straight through to the reporting for it. So in the reports tab now, in this one to the left here, we have a new tile called workflows. So this is where you can start to have a hub of all of the workflows we've created and that people have started and kind of completed. So as you can see here, within the last 7 days, we have got my incidents one. If I click into this kind of folder, it's going to open up the different forms within it so I can start to see the statuses of it, who it was assigned to, and all those kind of different categories and things like that. The information we need based on that whole workflow. Now, what we can do, of course, is set different date ranges and start to search by sites and things like that. You guys will have a lot more workflows than my little incident coming through. But yeah, start to filter based on what you need to look for and have those workflows come through with a nice big pocket so they're all linked together and we can see all that information in one hit. Now, in this kind of report, at this point in time, it is just a visual of what you kind of have within that workflow. So if you want to actually see the contents of those forms, we would jump across to completed forms. In our completed forms, you will also see these different folders showing up. So for example, here we've got that incident that I had. We've got the site incident injury register form first, and then the incident investigation form. They show us two individual pieces here, but when you click on them, it does also show you that whole pocket as well if you need it. So we do know, okay, these two are linked together. They're actually not separate forms. They just get completed separately, obviously. But in this case, what we can do is say I want to look at that investigation form. So what I'm going to do is click onto the eye icon like I would with any completed form. And it's going to pull out that whole report so I can start to see the information that investigator kind of put in. And we can start to export that out by printing it, sending it as a PDF, emailing it if we need to. We could even start making those corrective actions on it if further tasks need to be made. And then we can start to kind of go from there and keep building on those flows if we need to. But we can also now start to see that status is closed. We can see who approved it, the days that it kind of lasted for, and then also kind of opening dates, close dates, things like that. So starting to get those that information pulling through, even your kind of numbering prefix as well is coming through. So we know, okay, this is my 10th incident now. So I'm going to start keeping track of that over the duration of our time we've had health and safety with SiteApp Pro. Beautiful. So those are your two main locations we're going to come to start seeing those pockets of information based on our workflow. That is pretty much the beginning to end aspect of your workflow piece.